Father, what is this?
It's Indies, son. God damn Indies.
What's an indie?
Only the most unruliest, God-forsaken bunch of miscreants and misanthropes there has ever been.
Who brought them here?
I don't know, son. But if we let them in, they will surely be taking over.
Well, Father, you know what we should do?
Yes, son. We have no choice. We cannot let them take over our formulaic, automatonic way of life.
But Father, it feels so freeing.
Liberating. No, not you. No, son, not you. Come on, Father. Don't you know? No. It's always time to go, Indy, now. Welcome to the Indie Dozens for 2024. I am your host, Joe Compton. I am the guide through all of these, and I'm going to be preluding what we're doing tomorrow, which is, of course, this year in Indies, where myself and SM Hillman will be counting down our top 5 from 5 to 1 in that episode. Tonight, I am giving you I'm rounding out my dozen and giving you my 12 to 6 choices for indie books and indie movies. And also, I am going to mention some honorable mentions in this as well. So, without further ado, let's get started. I'll say hello to everybody. Tiffany, hello. Hello, Vanessa. And thank you. I am glad I did as well. Gave me time to prepare for a lot more of what I wanted to talk about tonight. So I'm real excited about that. And that being said, let's start with our Indie Dozen honorable mention for film this year. I have 3 films that I wanted to mention that just got close to my top 12, but were films that I really, really enjoyed this year that I thought really needed to be talked about. And those are Darumba, which is a film that was written by Kelly McGillen, and Alexander McGillen is the director. It stars Brian Boswick, just a host of great actors. It is one of those films that I really, really enjoyed. It is about a disabled man who finds out he has a daughter and what he has to do about that. He's kind of one of those guys that has kind of utilized his disability to kind of milk the system and be kind of lazy about it. And now that this young lady's come into his life, it kind of changes his perspective and outlook. I really wish that the first half of the film was a lot like the second half of the film. I think the second half really found its heart and its soul, and that's why it's just outside of the top 10. I didn't dislike the first half. I got what it meant, but I really, really enjoyed the second half of the film. I loved how real it was, how it just wasn't a neat little package that could have easily been wrapped up in the storytelling aspect of this film. I also love the cinematography. Alex Young is just a master at shot selection and design, and it is very, very well done in that. The lighting is spectacular. Speaking of great lighting and great set design and shot design, The Chip by Toddy Braley really would have been higher on my list. I really loved this story. I really enjoyed the character development. I loved, like I said, all the shots and all the interesting things that was done here. It just was too short. I think it needed about 20 more minutes, which is quite ironic. You won't hear me say that a lot about films. I usually am wanting the guy who wants to cut about 30 or 40 minutes out of a film, but this one I thought needed about 20 minutes more it's to let us marinate in some of the characters and develop them a little bit stronger, and especially the design of the intricate ending that it had. I thought was very well thought out. So I thought there could have been a couple conventions that would have let us deeper into that, and so that's why I just crept outside my top mentions here. And then the Outrun by which stars Sirius Ronan, who is just a powerhouse actor, incredible actor. Um, and she really shines in this movie. She's the star of this film, and she proves it. And it is without her on the screen in this movie really has a lot to kind of get into, and it's very deep and very grinding, and so she really puts it all together for you, and her performance really shines, and just it's more about her performance than the movie itself. uh I didn't The movie kind of loses me halfway through a little bit, but the performance just I had to talk about it because it's worth mentioning, and it's worth mentioning in the honorable mentions. Our honorable mentions for my indie books of 2024. I have a couple anthology selections here. Um, it was a strong year for anthologies. I just there's a couple that I was really looking forward to, um, and one of which was the Nevermore anthology from Falstaff Books, which is taking conventional Edgar Allan Poe stories and kind of turning them on their head. Misty Massey's version of Cast of Amontillado, where she kind of puts it in the Old West, very clever. This just didn't have a. I'm a Poe guy. I'm kind of a snob when it comes to Edgar Allan Poe because Edgar Allan Poe is really my gateway drug into everything else I've done in writing and in reading, and so a lot of these stories just barely tipped it for me a little bit. And so, other than Misty Massey's, which I thought was very clever, very interesting, I really enjoyed that story a lot. Just was not enough of those that I thought were clever enough for me to mention it into the top 12. It's really good, though. If you're a fan of Edgar Allan Poe, I really highly recommend it. Then we have Exploitation of Pain from Juliet Rose, who makes my list quite a bit this year. This is a really well done book. I love where Julia is going in her career and her trajectory. This is a book that I think has a lot of heart. It has a lot of interesting. It's kind of Lord of the Flies isk meets kind of this futuristic idealism that is kind of. It's really interesting. It puts a bunch of kids on a boat and trying to escape an island, and it is really. I really love the character development here. Um, it reminds me a lot of some of Juliet's earlier work too, and I really loved this book. It paces a little bit slower for me, and hence why it's in the honorable mentions. But it's worth being mentioned because I think Juliet had a smashing year. She's an incredible writer, and this is just a culmination of that. I really love these characters, and this was a really well done book in that respect. And I love, and the thing that, as always, I struggled with Juliet before. She's kind of course corrected for me, which is the second and third acts, and I think this has a really strong second act in it, and the third act kind of pays off the second act. The benefit of the second act. With an interesting little twist with the robots, and obviously I'm not going to spoil it, but it's very cool. It's a neat little just compilation of character study, and I in a world where you know we're all kind of hoping to get to a good place, and this kind of has a little bit. I can imagine when Juliet decided to write this book, just based on what's going on in our current world. Anyway, but I really enjoyed it. And then Gingerbread Kisses is another anthology. Um, I I think this is probably one of the best written books I'm going to review on this show this tonight. It's not for me. I'm just not a cozy guy. I just don't like the happy endings or the coziness of it. It was, it's just a little too sappy for me. Uh, and that happens, I can't fault it for that. It's what it is. And I know people are going to enjoy that, but it's really, really well done. There's three stories in here that are just so spectacularly written. I was enthralled by that aspect of it, and I enjoyed some of the character work in here. But again, just a little too lovey dovey for me, just a little bit. And I don't mean that I have to have everything dark, but because I do have some, you know, romantic tendencies that I like in a lot of storytelling, but this one just was a little too much Hallmark for me. But it's really well done and it needed to be mentioned. So hence why it's in my honorable mentions. All right. So now we're going to get into my countdown from 12 to 6. And we'll start with the number 12 indie film of 2024 for me, which is Reflect. It is a wonderful, um, esoteric, just interesting movie by Dana Kippel about five women who go on this kind of uh, pseudo spiritual journey. They're kind of what do you call those mall brats? They're kind of bratty, you know, 20 somethings who are kind of doing this in a kind of a selfish manner, and this kind of sets them on each of their individual journeys, which they have to go through these, this weird, just it's like an acid trip, but it's not an acid trip kind of idea, and each of them gets pegged off one by one, kind of Charlie in the Chocolate Factory style, uh, um, and it's very cool and very interesting, and the ending is had a nice little package and a nice little bow to it. I really loved Dana Kippel's style. I really like how she shoots things and kind of gives you this kind of franticness to it, and then brings you in with a just still shot where you're kind of reflecting, obviously the name of the movie, and it just gives you this really interesting way to kind of get into a character's mind that I haven't seen much in film. And I really love that about this movie. And it stuck with me all year long. I saw this movie early on in the year and it kind of stuck with me. I've seen it a couple times now. I rewatched it just for this purpose of this countdown. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So I really, really enjoyed that. All right. So my number 12 in the book of 2024 is an anthology that I think is really interesting. It is the absolute last thing I've read in 2024, which is Christmas Chaos, but from Outsider Publishing. It's a debut for this company. This is their debut anthology, and I there's three stories in here that really stood out for me, that I think just are spectacular. I'm a big fan of Justin Brimhall, and he does this little ditty called "The Ornament," which I think is very fascinating. It's kind of the box esque kind of story where you kind of get trapped in this kind of this idealistic nature of this phallic piece of for the most part an ornament, right? And it has this kind of effect on humans, which I think is very interesting. It was you kind of the way that Justin writes this is how you get lost in the story, is how the characters get lost, and I really thought that was very cool. Um, and then Home in the Box by Solomon Force. I hope I said that right, Solomon. I love the psychology of this, the idea that you're kind of giving us a surprise that's not a surprise to us, but a surprise to the characters. Very cool. I loved how that was approached and very, very neatly put together. and I love the payoff at the end of that story as well. And then The Abominable Foeman by Mark Dupont, or Dupont. I hope it's Dupont. Um, it's got this like '80s fashionable. And who could go wrong with Christmas carols and the Ramones, and then horror on top of that. I think those elements just lead itself to fantasticness. And it does. It's really spectacular. It reminds me a lot of, you know, what what the Ramones kind of has that kind of punk rock style to it, and the horror elements has that style to it, which I really dug, and so that really got me. There's a lot of other great stories in here. Those are the three that really stood out to me, though, and made this worth my list. And I just really enjoyed this book tremendously. I'd probably go back and reread a couple of the stories because I did kind of gloss over a couple of them, to be honest, because again, it was the last entry to my reading list of 2024. So I didn't pay it as much homage as I might have, and it might have gotten higher because of that. But this was really well done, and I look forward to seeing what Outsider Publishing puts out from here on out, because I think it's very interesting. I've got a couple debuts on my list this year, and a couple of things that really stood out for me. And then we go to my number 11 indie movie of 2024. It's Darla in Space. If you didn't read my review of this movie earlier in the year, I did a review on Fresh Butter Popcorn, Eric LaPlante, Susie Moon's very strange and weird telling of a woman who has found herself in a heap load of debt and finds this space-like entity, amoeba kind of thing that gives humans a certain excitement when they put this object on them, and it is that outlandish. And the performance of the year for me, Alex Harris plays a kind of a dual role. She plays the same person, but in a dual perspective, which I think is very cool. And she knocks it out of the park. She's at one point she's this mousy nerdy girl who has no confidence, and then she's this incredibly strong businesswoman who has all the confidence in the world, kind of an arrogance to her, and both of those things clash and they create this really cool tension, this really cool idea of how much is enough. And I think that's really an interesting concept that is embedded deep into this movie, that is just has a lot of silliness and a lot of really good comedic lines as well. And Alex Harris has impeccable comedic timing to round out that selection for me. My number 11 book of 2024, uh, you know, uh, as long as JD Black Rose decides to write The Summoner's Mark, and I know it's ending very soon, it's always going to be one of those sentimental favorites for me. Pinky's Promise is my number 11 indie book of 2024. This is an interesting one, though, based on the past ones, right? All of the Summoner Mark series, I contend you can pretty much read standalone-ish. Maybe a little bit before this, Wish Magic and a couple others, the last of the first trilogy. Those you might need to brush up on the first books to really gather a lot of what is going on and kind of be in the moment of what is really happening. But this book is kind of a love letter to the fans of this series, in my opinion. This book really has a lot of Easter eggs and internal things that I think only people of the series would really gravitate toward, and I think that's pretty cool. That this is kind of a departure from the one-off book. It does have a one-off setting that sets up probably the next book and the book before it. It reaches, it folds over from the book before it, and it kind of goes into a lot of the ideas of where the magic and where Hellscape is going from here. Bex is, of course, Bex, and she's full Beckness in this book, and and of course we're all Pinky is one of those characters that everybody loves, and we kind of felt a little um, disjointed about how the last book ended for and what Pinky had to go through. So this is kind of a love letter to those fans as well. I think in a lot of respects, I could be wrong, but that's how I felt it when I was reading it, and I really appreciated that. I love Pinky as a character, but I also love that this didn't patronize you. You know, it didn't just here's what's wrong with Pinky, go for it. It wasn't like that. This was a very this had its own plot. It has its own broody, interesting things about magic and some new things that are introduced here, which I think is very fascinating too. So this is a really good entry into this series, and of course it's going to make my list. So that was my number 11 indie book of 2024. My number 10 indie book is one of two documentaries I have on this list. It's called Minnesota Mean. It is a documentary by Don Mickelson that I was privileged to see well before it actually got out on streaming. I saw it at CineQuest a couple of years ago. I'm so glad to see it's out there and everybody can now check it out. It is the story of a now defunct pro roller derby team from Minnesota and their journey to try and win the national championship, and what this team is about and who they are. And the really, really, I mean, the shots here. I mean, the shots. I've never. You watch action sports being on the course, like like if you were on a NASCAR course. This is literally Dawn is literally panning back as people are coming toward her on skates at an amazing speed. But not only that, but the crowd shots are very well taken here. But more importantly, this is a story about 12 women that I think needed to be told and is told so delicately and so well that you really find yourself wanting to know more about who these people are and what they do and why they do it. And all of that is explained here. And I think that is a really, really tough thing to do in 90 minutes. And Dawn does it impeccably. She's always been that way. I mean, last year I had Finding Her Beat on my list, and that was um, another one that is very much about the people who are involved in doing something spectacular. This is no exception. This is a really good documentary, and I highly recommend it for those of you who are looking for something a little bit different and a little bit female empowering, because it does have that element to it, but it also has that vulnerability and that nice sentiment about how being a team and being a part of something is really important in this day and age. And so I really love that. And so that's my number 10 favorite indie film of 2024. My number 10 favorite indie book of 2024 is Rachel Taylor Thompson's Feather and a Blade. This debut novel is very, very cool. This is so freaking smart. Oh my God, this book is so smart. It is written so well. It is a political. I want to, look, I am the guy who wants to see fantasy change. I want to see it turned on its head and just rocked right into something different. And this book does that to the nth degree. This is I want to say this is a fantasy book, but there's so much more going on. There's political drama. There's this interesting thing about witchcraft and its view and how it's accepted but not accepted, and then the class systems, and there's just so many intricacies in here that I just think are so awesome and so amazing, and I just love those details. I love how smart this book is, and it doesn't apologize for that. It doesn't dumb itself down at moments that you would think a normal fantasy book might, just to get that fantasy embrace, right? I think this book is well above. I can't wait to see where this goes and how it goes forward, because I do feel like there's a series here that is going to be stellar and amazing, and I really, really love it. It is written very well. Um, and you can see the time and care that was taken in this book and how it plays out. So I'm real excited for the future for Rachel Taylor Thompson and this series. That is my number 10 indie book of 2024. My number 9 indie movie of 2024 is Love Lies Bleeding. Uh, this is this is the second movie of as many years to have a bodybuilding kick-ass theme, and this is done by Rose Glass, who did this really weird horror film in 2019 called Saint Maud. So I was real excited to see her kind of do this kind of adventurous kind of movie. The ending is very strange. I will say it kind of took me by surprise, but Kristen Stewart here is phenomenal. Holy shit. If you ever wanted to see her erase her Twilight persona, you got to see this movie. It is fucking amazing. The performances are amazing. Katie O'Brien is a star. She's the bodybuilder you see holding the gun there on the left. And Dave Franco plays a scumbag better than anybody I can think of to play a scumbag, even more so than his brother. He's really good in this movie. Ed Harris is really good in this movie, who also is a part of the main plot of this movie. It is very interesting, is very graphic, and it is very messy, and I love that. I love that. The shots, the use of the overhead lighting in these spots, in these little deserty spots where they have these warehouses and they have these streaming lights, so brilliant. I love that they didn't crop that out. I love that they utilized that in shots. I love the idea of how quickly we go from close up to wide shot to close up to medium shot. There is such a great edit here, and it flows so well, and it has such a great um, bunch of pickup shots that I think really enhance our intensity level, and I really enjoyed that about this movie. This is an incredibly well done and well acted film, and it is something that I highly recommend. It's on Max. If you have Max, it's free on Max right now. So go check it out. Love Lies Bleeding. It is my number 9 indie film of 2024. My number 9 indie book of 2024 is Mark Abbott's Sinister Ascension. Uh, Vampire books, yeah, this book is very, very cool. Um, it takes vampire lore to a whole other level, and vampire and basically assholeness to a whole other level too. It is very cool, set in a college where there is little doubt that nobody is of college age in this book, but it's very interesting anyway. Um, I love it. I love Mark's tendency for dialogue here. There's a lot of really great conversations that I think happen that flow so well into the storyline. And I dig that about Mark. I think he's got a cadence to him that really helps you just move along, and then he hits you with this little degree of, this is an interesting fact about vampirism, or this is an interesting fact about what we're doing and how we're doing it. And he starts it off like any good horror book does, where he sets up the stage from the very beginning because it has a history. So he takes the little bit of history that helps you wonder what the fuck is going on, and because it goes right into the main story right after that, after the prologue, and it's just, but that plays a part in it, so I really appreciate that. Me and prologues, so to incorporate that, very well done, very smart. I love, like I said, I love the pacing of this book. It's very easy to get through, and I really enjoyed everything about it. And I look forward to seeing what Mark does in this kind of space, because I think he's got a knack for really understanding the psychology of creatures and supernatural things like that. So this is interesting, and it kind of leads me into another interesting departure for my number 8 indie movie of 2024. Another movie I saw a while ago that takes the mafia genre and turns it on its head, and really examines the women who are involved in the mafia life. It's called Fresh Kills. It is a movie written and directed by Jennifer Esposito, who you would know very easily. If I put her face on the screen, you would know who she is. If you don't, um, you could just look her up and you go, oh, yeah, I know her. She also is in the movie. She plays the mother in the movie, which is very interesting. But this movie is really Odessa Azan's just fucking kicking down the door. Here I am movie. She is fucking awesome in this movie. This is my best. This is my favorite supporting performance of the year, because Odessa just knows how to play this interesting, uh, black sheepish, very vulnerable character that has a lot of flaws, but also has a lot to give and has a reason for her loyalty and her and everything about her. And the mafia angle is played up here in a little bit of a eh, what do I say? Uh, Cliche way, but it is still valuable to what the story brings and why these women get kind of put in this situation and how they work through it. And it's very well done. I love this perspective. It's a unique perspective and an interesting one, and I really enjoyed going through that. And the third act of this film is very intense, and I enjoyed that tremendously. Um, my number 8 indie book of 2024 is a finishing touch to an incredible series. It is Wayne Turmel's Johnny Lycan and the Last Witchfinder. What I love about this book is that it comes full circle. It doesn't. Book two was kind of a departure from book one. It was very different, in my personal opinion. And so I love that book three kind of ties all that back together and brings you back to book one in a lot of respects, and brings me back to why I enjoy um, Johnny and the characters around Johnny. This is just one of those really well, funny, just nicely paced books that is just a romp, and I really enjoyed that. And I love how it ties it all together and kind of leaves it open ended. You know, and maybe if we poke Wayne enough, he'll write another one. Who knows? But he's kind of done with it. But which I understand. But this is a really cool way to if this is the last Lycan book we get, this is a really cool way to go out. And I enjoyed um, the Chekhov's gun in this book too, and throughout the series. And I really enjoyed just the way that Wayne incorporates humor. It is unique to Wayne, and it kind of has this nice voice that really I enjoy. So it's right up my alley. So that is my number 8 indie book. My number 7 indie movie of 2024 is a French film called A Real Job. Imagine Abbott Elementary, told in a more serious tone. This is about teachers, and they're trying to get an inner city, a very poorly run inner city neighborhood, to kind of get these kids out of the mindset that they're losers, that they can't be something, that they don't have potential. And what that job does to the teachers, it really comes from their perspective and shows an incredible style of learning and dealing with the fascinations of today, and how we coddle the learning process a little bit, and how they have to overcome that, and how they just want to give these kids a lot more than what the curriculum demands of them. And it is very interesting because it's about a teacher who really doesn't want to teach too, and he's doing it because he has no other job opportunity, and he kind of falls in with this group and falls in love with the idea of it. And it's very interesting how it all ends up. And I really enjoyed this film a lot. It's a real hard film to find. It is a film on a network called Ovid, which you'll hear more about here at Go Indie Now, because we're slowly working on becoming partners with Ovid TV, and I'll tell you more about that as the time goes by. But this is one of those films I think is very worth it. It is not as French as French can be, right? So that's good too. I know that's kind of a slap in the face, but honestly, that is, yeah. I think you all know what I mean by that, right? It is very cool. It is a very interesting film. All right, number seven. My number seven indie book of 2024 is Standing on the Shadows by Mr. Bobby Nash. This is a Tom Myers mystery that I think is so cool. This may be my favorite introduction to a character in a series that I've ever had in anything I've ever read. I just love how Bobby writes characters. He just really has a knack for the characters that he, populates in his world. And this actually has a really cool beginning hook that I think is just like this very cool murder mystery element to it that I think is just keeps the keeps it on an edge that I think is probably different than some of the Tom Myers books of before. But this also it really goes into the process of a man who is trying to, you know, keep a town afloat, and it's just it has all those interesting elements and why it's a struggle and a small town sheriff and doing the small town sheriff thing. And we get a little bit more about Tom Myers than I think we've ever gotten in any of the other books. And so I appreciate that that's part of this as well. And that is my number seven book. I think this is a really, really good book. If you wanted to get into, I think you could read it without reading the other Tom Myers books, but I think reading Evil Ways, where Tom Myers first appears, and then reading the other Tom Myers mysteries, I think he has it all now in a omnibus that you can get, so you can read all of them at once, which I think is not a bad idea. But it's a really good standalone story that I enjoyed. It has a really cool beginning, and a fun look at Tom Myers and his life. All right, my number six indie film of 2024 is a documentary called Black Box Diaries. I'm a fan of documentaries that defy the convention. This is not a documentary where you sit down and you talk to people and you go over facts. This is a documentary about a woman who wrote a memoir. She is the writer and director of this movie, and she wrote a memoir. Her name is Shiori Ito. She was a journalist who actually was a victim of sexual abuse from one of the biggest studios in Tokyo, by one of the biggest executives in Tokyo. And this is the story of that trial and the interesting things that come along with Japanese politics and the outdatedness of its traditional value and the quietness of women and the meekness. Uh, she is very. This is kind of this reenactment story in a lot of ways, but it's very interesting and delicate how this documentary kind of goes about looking at all these interesting angles and things about it, and it gets really deep and fascinating, and it is really it is heartbreaking in a lot of respects too, and I just really appreciated how vulnerable she was in this thing, and how she put it out there for all of us, and it just is amazing. It is one of those movies that will just kind of take you back and go, I really did I just see what I thought I saw kind of idea. And it's a documentary, so it's kind of cool. And like I said, it doesn't play like a documentary; it plays like a thriller almost in a lot of respects, which is very or a crime or a true crime show where you're watching a trial take place. One of those true TV things or whatever they call them. And they're very interesting, and it's the memoir. It made me read the memoir too, which I think is even more fascinating. Um, I don't know how well it translated in English versus Japanese. I've obviously read the English version, but there is some things in there that aren't in the movie that I thought, yeah, I could see why not. But that's how deep and really almost disgusting this thing goes into in a lot of respects, and I think it needs to be said. I think it needs to be put out there, and so I'm really appreciative of Miss Ito doing that, and this is a great film for that. It's my number six indie film again. Black Box Diaries. And so we've come to the last indie book of 2024 before I go into my top five, which of course will happen tomorrow. My number six indie book of 2024 is one that I think is just another one of those that puts it all together. Beyond Human by J.D. Estrada. It is the final book in the human cycle, book three. And for me, this is the Avengers. This is Endgame. This is everything you wanted it to be. Brings back a lot of characters. It piggybacks on number two. Gives you this really cool ending that is kind of thought provoking and interesting, and it just kicks you right where you want it to kick you. It goes places that you've never been before, and it gives a lot of explanation to a lot of things that you were wondering about, and it ties it all together so beautifully and neatly. It is a really, really, it is everything you, when you read book one, like I have said, and I've said in the interview that I did with JD about this, and I've said on countless reviews. And in fact, I reviewed all three of these books at once on Fresh Butter Popcorn. And book one was one of those I had to absorb. I had to sit down with and had to get through and figure out what I really felt about it. And then book two was the Infinity War. It was the ass kicker. It was the, we're going to go full, punk rock and full metal on this one and just hit it a straightaway of 80 miles an hour. And then this one kind of goes right into that, but hits the brakes really hard and brings everything back together. And I love that aspect of it. And it brings back characters that I really just wanted to see have their end and have their conclusion. And I'm real appreciative of that JD managed to do that so delicately and so intricately and give you a story on top of that. This is not just, here's the end fight and good luck. This is what leads to the end fight that leads to this, that leads to that, and then what it all means at the end. I don't think you can do much better than that in terms of ending a series and bringing it all together. It is just amazing, and it is my number six indie book of 2024. So there you have it, everybody. My 12 through 6 of my indie dozens on books and movies. I will be back tomorrow with SM Hillman to do this year in indies. We will be live noon Eastern with our 1 through 5. And then SM Hillman is also going to add in his 5 favorite indie games of 2024. And we have a very special indie connection for those of you who have been part of the Go Indie Now family. I hope you tune in for that because it's our love letter to you tomorrow. So I'm not going to say any more about it. We just have to watch and see what we mean. And in the epilogue, we will have an epilogue. We're not going to ask each other 20 questions, but we have an interesting question that we're going to debate and talk about at the end of the show and give you insight into what's 2025 ahead for Go Indie Now as well. So all of that will culminate tomorrow with this year in Indies, but it's not the end of our programming for the year because on Christmas Day, myself and JD Estrada will be along to give you our indie music picks of 2024. We did 10. I mean, we could have easily called it the Indie Dozen because we talked about probably 14 or 15 albums in that conversation. But that being said, it is truly a top 10. We did a top 10 list and some honorable mentions. And we talked about some albums because it was a real strong year for studio albums, for big studio events. So we did talk about that, and we gave some albums some love that didn't need our love because they're already selling millions of copies, but that we thought needed to be mentioned because they were important and very good albums of the year. So you'll want to check that out. That'll be on Christmas Day when that drops. And then I also have an interview with the number one book that I will reveal tomorrow. My number one book, I sat down and interviewed that person for that, and I will put that as a spotlight episode. And we have Zero Means You're Dead, which I'm working on as we're talking. Well, not as we're talking, but I am working on it behind the scenes, and I'm hoping to get that out very soon. That is the other thing that we have to get out before we get out of here for 2024. I just want to say personally, while I have this opportunity, thank you to everybody who gave me an opportunity to read or watch their film or read their book. Um, I read so much this year, more than I've ever read in my entire life, and I watched a lot of films as I normally do, and I really felt that this was a really tough list to put together. I had a real hard time with it because there was so much really good stuff I wanted to mention that I didn't even mention, maybe down the road. But rest assured, if I read your book, no matter if it makes this list or not, you will be getting a review from me and everybody here. Um, the 6 books and the 6 films that if I haven't reviewed them already, which I think I've reviewed 2 of the books and 3 of the films, but if I haven't reviewed them already, they will get a full-fledged fresh butter popcorn review posted very soon, most likely at the very beginning of the year, to go over each and every one of them with a fine-tooth comb and give you a more thorough insight than I did here. I was just trying to get through the list a lot. This is such a diverse list, and I'm really proud of that as well. I'm really happy with a lot of people putting themselves out there and doing some really, really reflective things this year that I think really showed where we are as an art group. And I think indies are really killing it. And it was never more evident than this year. And so I was real excited to put this list out there for you all. Thank you for everybody who was in the chat and enjoying it. I know I didn't put a lot of you up here in the comments, but I know I've seen you all, and I really do appreciate you, each and every one of you, coming in here and giving your thoughts and love to these books and to yourselves, because a lot of you were mentioned in this conversation as well. All right, and I appreciate all the love for me as well. I appreciate that. But you guys did all the hard work. I just was lucky enough to read them and be a part of that. And I'm so grateful for that. Because, we have so much more to do and so much more to say, and we're going to keep putting more stuff out there. So I really appreciate each and every one of you, because it's always time to go indie now. And we will see you again tomorrow at noon Eastern. Come join us for This Year in Indies. I promise you won't want to miss it.